Hi, I'm Siege from the Puma Podcast team. If you like listening to this show and others created by our team, you can help us keep making them through our PumaPatak tip jar. Our goal is to get 100 of you, our friends, to make a contribution and show your support for the journalism and storytelling that we do. We're happy to keep making shows that you can listen to for free, but making them isn't free, so we appreciate any support you send our way. All you need to do is to go to pumapodcast.com where you'll find a link to the Pumapatak tip jar.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna.
And I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News. Balitang thinking, hindi breaking.
In this episode, we share our favorite podcasts of 2022.
Here at Puma Podcast, when we say our mission is to share the joy, power, and value in listening, we don't just mean our content.
After all, podcasts in the Philippines have seen over 60% growth in listenership over the past year. And local shows are leading the charge. We should know.
So at our final General Assembly this year, we asked our team to share their favorite local and international podcasts with you, our dear listeners. Have a listen.
Hi, I'm Siege Tantenko, creator of the Go Hard Girls podcast. My favorite podcast this year is Lady Killers by the BBC. It is a podcast that looks at Victorian-era murders, and it's hosted by the historian Lucy Worsley. So she does a feminist analysis of what caused these murders to happen, what impacted the trials, and what happened to the cases ultimately. So it's true crime with a feminist twist. My favorite Puma podcast this year is Catch Me If You Can with Jonathan Ong and Kat Ventura. Kasi I think after the elections, we were all struggling to figure out ano ba nangyari, paano ba ito nangyari, where do we move from here? And listening to Catch Me If You Can, even though it's really frustrating to hear the details about how troll farms work, it also gives me clarity and makes me feel like, hey, we can do something. My favorite local podcast, apart from the ones we make, is Kwentong Creatives, hosted by Gio Puyat, and The Colonial Department, hosted by Leo Mangubat. So these are two great podcasts. Gio's is an interview-style podcast with leading Filipino creatives, and The Colonial Department with Leo is a history podcast. So as a history podcaster, I really enjoyed listening to other history podcasts, and his specifically talks about stories from the colonial period. Always fun to learn more about history.
Hi, I'm Nina. I am a producer and audio editor for Puma Podcast. My favorite international podcast this year has been NPR's Throughline. It has taught me a lot in the past year about how culture connects to greater social-political issues on a global scale, like how public rage is reflected in our penchant for reality TV. And I also love the sound design. It offers a different kind of immersion from what we do in Puma Podcast. It can get chaotic. All of these elements are weaving together, but I appreciate what it does for the story. Locally, my favorite podcast has been the Howie Severino podcast. He's always been such an engaging storyteller. And it's been great to hear him picking the brains of some of our greatest public figures in different sectors, just really getting a full conversation out for us to tune into, to sit in on. And my favorite Puma Podcast show this year has been Estate of Mind, our podcast with Ayala Land Estates. Growing up, I loved design. I read design magazines, and once upon a time, I wanted to be an architect. And I love talking about how our built environment helps shape our lives. It reminds us that people's decisions and yung disiplina, they aren't just personal choices. We need purposeful policies and design to build well-rounded lives.
Hello, I'm Joe Salcedo, audio editor ng Puma Podcast. Ang favorite kong international na podcast ay Song Exploder. Gusto ko siyang pinapakinggan kasi gusto kong malaman yung production, yung flow, kung paano sinulat or kung bakit sinulat ng mga artists yung mga kanta nila. And marami akong nakukuhang ideas rin dahil sa mga kwento nila and na-apply ko sa aking ang mga ginagawa dito sa sa bahay. Ang favorite kong podcast show ay Usapang Econ. Dahil bilang mahina ako sa economics ng college, yung Usapang Econ ay nabibigyan ako ng opportunity para ma-refresh yung mga nakalimutan ko na nung college. And yung topics ng Usapang Econ ay nako-connect niya sa real life situations ba na nangyari sa bansa natin, tulad ng nudging and yung inflation ngayon na nararanasan natin this year. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Macy Aven, producer of The Imaginable Workplace. Yeah. So my favorite international podcast is Bible in a Year. So Bible in a Year reads through the Bible for 365 days every day. May bagong section na mababasa. And it's an absolute life changer and eye-opener for me. Kasi if you thought na school taught you everything you needed to know about your faith, hindi pala ganun. And I realized na sobrang dami ko pa palang hindi alam. And sobrang nakatulong yung podcast na ito for me to live better. And then my favorite podcast from PumaPodcast is The Imaginable Workplace. So I love producing this podcast. Every time ang dami kong natututunan dito sa bawat episode, sa bawat interview, sa bawat VO recording, mas naintindihan ko kung ano bang kailangan to create a workplace that we can all aspire for.
Hi, I'm Ella, audience engagement staffer here at Puma Podcast. And this year, I really fell in love with audio fiction. I discovered the Amelia Project by Imploding Fictions. It's a series about a company that helps interesting people fake their own deaths and set them up with new lives. And I really enjoy it, mostly because of the plot, but also because every character that they meet and set up a new life for, they change the theme music to match the vibe. So they once went back in time to set up the new life of like an ancient Egyptian person, and suddenly the theme music became Egyptian themed. I said theme a lot in this sentence. Locally, I really like the Telebabad tapes. It really feels like nakikitelebabad ka lang, kasama nila Wincy Ong and CJ De Silva Ong. They talk about parang pop culture and things that irk them about the things that go on in society, and I'm really into that as a fellow reclamador. And within Puma Podcast, my favorite has always been WhatsApp Araling Panlipunan Rebooted. I was never a history fan in high school, in college, but somehow every single episode that the team comes up with, lagi akong may natututunang bagong, and I learned to appreciate the world around us more.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm the audio and tech lead of Puma Podcast, and my favorite podcast of the year is Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. So dahil nga we're a podcast production company, heavily produced yung ginagawa namin. It's fun to just listen to conversations between two people na different universe sila nakatira. So it's a way of refreshing my mind lang. And then, yung favorite local podcast ko is the Linya Linya Show. May Ali Sanggalang. Sa opening pa lang nila, aligned na tayo sa kanila eh. Listen up, yo. And because gusto natin ng a world that listens, we wanna listen. And aside from that, very chill yung conversations nila dun eh. And these are conversations with a lot of personalities then that I'm curious how they look at things. So, yung mga nagustuhan ko mga episodes is yung kina Batas, tsaka yung kay Josh of Autotelic. mga personalities of the music industry na kilala ko lang, but I have not had the chance to pick their minds. So the Linya Linya show gives me an opportunity to do that. Ang aking favorite Puma Podcast show of the year is Conservative Ako. It gives a platform for conversation on the aspects of our sexual lives na hindi directly related to sex. So, yung RH law, yung connection ng guilt and religion sa sex life mo. So, the other factors of your sex life na hindi just about sex. At the same time, it gives a platform for these uncomfortable discussions.
Hi, I'm Mar. I'm the social media manager from Puma Podcast. And my favorite podcast this year is Today Explained by Vox. So I like learning new stuff and it really helps me understand the new things going on. And for the local podcast, I like listening to Wake Up with Jim and Sap kasi parang kwentuhan lang siya on the side. So parang nakiki-join lang din ako sa conversation. And my favorite Puma Podcast show this year is Modus. So, hindi ako masyadong mahilig sa true crime na pods, pero Modus really made me appreciate yung ganong type of podcast kasi it's funny, very funny, and at the same time, maiinis ka sa mga pinag-uusapan nila.
And for the last time in 2022, that was today's episode of Teka Teka. Wishing you a Merry Christmas, I'm Franco Luna.
And I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was produced by Kat Ventura. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or two. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka and Puma Podcast wherever you listen. We're excited to build our community with you, and it looks like we'll be able to meet for events real soon. So if you want to stay in the loop, please go to PumaPodcast.com and subscribe to our newsletter.
At para sa mga mahilig manood sa YouTube, Puma Podcast na rin po kami doon. Just search Puma Podcast and subscribe to our channel. For a world that listens, thanks for tuning in.